Chapter 1. Origins. Although the two thermal detonators themselves did not vibrate in any way, I could feel a trembling pulsation in my outstretched hands. Tiny embedded lights in the surfaces of the explosive devices winked on and off, pulsing in the dim light between the cloaked figure and me. I was fully prepared to detonate them both, ending the paths of two warriors, and departing this life here. Now if that became necessary. My lightsaber lay on a stone workbench on the second level. The blade I had used to hunt and execute countless numbers of his kind during the Purge would not help me this time. As I had been taught years before, my mind was clear and guarded. There would be no tricks played by the Jedi that stood between the cave opening and me. My preoccupation with the jobs at hand must have been thoroughly distracting. By the time his approach was felt, it was too late. In the seemingly endless space between the nanoseconds that now ticked away, my mind raced, crashing through a cascade of memories as I recalled the chain of events that had brought us both to this singular moment. In the last years of the Old Republic, leaders of industry and the head of the mining guild were assembled by Count Dooku to form a select subgroup of the Trade Federation. None were aware that Dooku was secretly Darth Tyrannus, Sith apprentice to Darth Sidious, and that Sidious was masquerading as Senator Palpatine, the Sith Lord who would become Emperor. The veiled agenda motivating the Group's formation lay in the need for pooled resources to bring a sickeningly monstrous undertaking to fruition. It was in the early stages of battles that would later become known as the Clone Wars. Count Dooku and a team of Geonosian design experts successfully completed planning and launched the covert construction of a weapon that would carry the Trade Federation and Dooku's Sith Master into a new era of galactic domination and unimaginable power. The sheer scope of their plan, not only in physical size, but also in the scale of the deception, was staggering. Planets represented by the Guild were mined for the ores needed, stripped of their raw materials, each burning brightly in the flurry of activity and jobs that the project required as they were consumed. As mining efforts were withdrawn and the jobs disappeared, they were left behind as mere shells of what they had once been, barren reminders of the Empire's blind ambition, all but dying out entirely. In extreme cases, breathable gases had to be collected from the atmosphere and forced into contained cities. In the more fortunate locations, only moisture needed coaxing from the air using evaporative collection units. The project was kept hidden from everyone except those responsible for its design. Once construction began, the design team was summoned to an emergency meeting. While en route to the meeting, their transport shuttle fell victim to a horrible navigational mishap. The ship's nav computer was somehow set for a lightspeed jump on a course that directed it through a tight clustering of stars. The ship was vaporized, and unfortunately, the crew and passengers along with her. It was rumored that one of the weapon's designers, Moff Rebus, had missed the flight, and gone into hiding following the accident. He would factor into my life years later, during my missions on a note. In the years that unfolded during the course of the ravaging Clone Wars, many things came to light. General Grievous was sought and ultimately destroyed by General Obi-Wan Kenobi. Darth Sidious was entrenched deeper than ever in his plan to unravel the fabric of the Republic, and as the beginning of the end. Sidious' Sith apprentice, Count Dooku, was slain by Anakin Skywalker, beheaded by his own blade in combat. Years before, in Skywalker's youth, subtle groundwork had been laid, guiding him along a crooked path. It led him to a decision-making crossroad where ultimately he would not only replace Dooku as Sidious' Sith apprentice, he would do so of his own choosing. The newly born Sith Lord, Darth Vader, would be instrumental in the complete and utter eradication of the Jedi protectors of the Republic that stood directly in the way of his new master's power play. By the time the Jedi Temple fell under Skywalker's hand, and the very letter of Executive Order 66 was being carried out by clone units across the galaxy, the skeletal framework of the project was nearing completion. Raw materials were flooding in from the mining guild to a remote construction location to continue the work. The surreptitious project had been so expertly protected and hidden from even the Jedi by Dooku, that Emperor Palpatine commissioned a garrison from among the hand-picked members of Darth Vader's 501st Legion, the very troops that had stormed the Jedi Temple alongside him, and placed them in charge of security for the station's construction. To honor his fallen apprentice, he anointed the newly formed group Garrison Tyrannus. At this time, I was growing up on Tenab, which had thankfully avoided the gutting so many other planets had endured, mainly because of the Imperial shipyards located there. It had had very harsh cold seasons, so my family would spend that time with relatives on nearby Corellia. My father was an engineer, and my mother worked for an imperial agency. She spoke little of it, and I never pushed to know more than she offered. When I was a boy, I worked for my father at Industrial Automaton, building astromech droids. It was this work that revealed my love of engineering, design and construction. Industrial Automaton, at that time, before their merger with Saro Suab, was a wholly owned subsidiary of Blastech Industries. I spent my last few seasons on Tenab working for Blastech designing field cannons and orbital platform armaments. After my shift, I would sometimes hang around to watch the Imperial cargo ships arrive, with Stormtrooper guards picking up container after container of E-11s. I knew someday I wanted to be one of them, but still being slightly underage, that was as close as I could get to the action of the Empire. Over the next 2 seasons, I learned how to install intelligent turbolifts, compactors and garbage chutes in my life before the Empire, while interning in the Tenab shipyards. I spent more time than I care to remember installing mile after mile of turbolifts and massive trash compactor systems in the bellies of starships. As one of my installation assignments came to a close, I was selected, along with a group of several hundred other workers, for a new project that would last several seasons. At the new, clandestine location, we installed garbage chutes, trash compactors, waste recycling economy systems and turbolifts on a massive project that dwarfed any I had previously worked. On one occasion I asked a stormtrooper standing guard what the huge skeletal framework was supposed to be for. I was quickly told it was better to know less and live longer. I had worked on many ships over the years, and it didn't look like any ship I had ever seen. It looked more like some kind of space station, but I kept my observations quietly to myself. My interest, however, was irretrievably piqued, and it was there that I signed up with the Empire. I was accepted into Stormtrooper training almost immediately and shipped off to Kurita for nearly a year of intense training. The construction project continued to move ahead as I trained. Its scale was enormous, never before equaled in all of recorded history. The final product would be roughly the size of a Class 4 moon. By compartmentalizing their tasks, secrecy was maintained even from those troopers working on it. With the birth of the rebellion, supply lines became compromised in some sectors. The fledgling rebels had no idea what supplies they were diverting or destroying. They simply knew the cargo was stamped with an Imperial security code, and they attacked the defenseless Federation convoys. The ambushes spooked many of the regular suppliers. They were transport pilots with families, just working for a paycheck. After the first wave of attacks, many walked away from the job. Those that remained were smugglers for the most part, less than reputable and suspect in and of themselves. Shortly after the end of the final clone battles on Kashyyyk, many of the Wookiee survivors were enslaved and taken to work on the construction. In the years that followed, there were several instances of small, unorganized uprisings among the Wookiees, which were dealt with swiftly and brutally. One of the smugglers, so troubled by what he saw, broke into the slave quarters, destroying records and freeing several hundred of the hairy Wookiee giants. He set off several dozen explosive charges, destroying a weapons stronghold, and made his escape with at least one of the Wooks aboard his ship. Most of the delivery manifests were destroyed in the raid, and the rogue pilot was never identified. The only manifests recovered from the burned-out wreckage showed inbound shipments from the remote desert planets Dantawan and Tatooine to the construction site, with continuing flight plans to the Endor system. After my graduation from the academy, I was assigned to garrison Tyrannus and sent for more training in a small unit on one of those very planets. Dantawan. The arid landscape there served as a perfect proving ground for practicing and honing desert survival techniques and skills I had learned in the classroom. Although the assignment was far more intense and challenging than I had ever expected, I enjoyed it, and asked to remain deployed there as a TD-designated Sandtrooper. I settled in with a small squad of troops in charge of monitoring several mining facilities, each of which fed a constant stream of ore transports to the project build site. In the several years that followed, I kept in contact with others from my garrison who were assigned as security for the project. They kept me up to date as I trained to become a sniper, mastering the DLT-19 before being reassigned to Mimban. Soon thereafter, shipments of ore ceased from Tatooine, but continued steadily from Dantawan until many years after my departure. Somewhere along the line I lost touch with the troops working security, and my interests were pulled in other directions as my assignments called me to many new places across the galaxy. While my friends at the Project Build site had been able to maintain security, they didn't have the numbers needed to repel any serious external assaults or onboard insurrections should they have arisen. The project had also grown too large to keep concealed from long-range scanners. Loyalists from Alderaan and many other inner systems were merging efforts to scan for possible remote building sites. They feared the very covert operations that were currently underway. They hoped to one day regain the peace they had known before the Empire, and acted to protect the remaining civilized pockets of their broken republic. Remote listening posts, comp scanners and orbital signal jamming platforms were deployed to assist in keeping the draped veil securely in front of the project. Behind the shroud, armored ground assault vehicles, TIE squadrons, speeder bikes and a weapons stockpile including hand-to-hand weapons along with larger-scale, sonic charges was amassed. In all, the project progressed for nearly 20 standard years from its inception until all systems were finally brought online, and its existence was made known, its name revealed, Death Star. With the battle station completed, the security team headed by Garrison Tyrannus was reassigned to other duties close to the Sith Lord. Some were dispatched to temporary assignments on the new battle station, some to duty on board Star Destroyers, with the remainder being assigned to various other posts, depending on their training and specialty. Some of the members of Garrison Tyrannus were assembled into a small patrol unit, assigned to re-establish an Imperial presence in the closed outpost on Tatooine. It was with the formation of this new unit that my standing transfer request was finally answered. Late in the day, as I was returning from a 3-day mission in the caves beneath a Note City, my CO confirmed the transfer. Deckard, I just got the holonet confirmation of your transfer approval. I don't remember signing off on this, but I guess I must have if it's going through. Thank you, sir, I replied. So, how did things go this time? I shouldered my rifle and glanced back toward the entrance of the caves. It went as well as could be expected. We found traces of old camp locations Rebus used, but no luck locating his. I turned my head back around to look at my CO, only to find that he had walked away from me as I was in the middle of my reply. This had become typical and was not completely without some level of anticipation, but it still pissed me off. He must have had a sudden, urgent need to check in with headquarters. I often wondered if he ever did any work at all. The rest of us in his unit were constantly pulling his weight and making the difficult, necessary decisions while he disappeared at critical moments. I glanced skyward. Dark clouds were slowly gathering, and moisture hung heavy in the air as night came on, preparing to dump yet more water on us. I entered my barracks, hurriedly gathered my gear together and slipped off my armor plates. I sat down, flipped open my field holonet pack and keyed a special request to the pilot of the shuttle that would be arriving in the morning. Confirmation of my sent message flashed 3 times on the small screen. I leaned back in the chair and switched it off. I was finally getting out of here. That pleasant thought lingered in my mind as I stood up and crossed the small space to my bunk. I sat on its edge, and lifted my legs up and in as I lay my head back to the pillow. My empty stomach growled, begging to be fed, but after the day I had had, I was just too tired to eat. My eyes burned as thoughts and images from the past several days flooded through my head. My breathing slowed and steadied and I gave in to the seductive reprieve of sleep as the sound of the first droplets of falling rain became an elemental, hypnotic rhythm. *****. I awoke with a heart-pounding start to the blare of the klaxon mounted on the wall of the barracks. Other troopers began slipping on their gear and heading out for chow. It was almost light, and I knew my shuttle would be there soon. I gathered the few personal belongings I had and shoved them into my gear bag. As I was drawing the closure tight, I heard the whine of engines overhead. Standing anxiously, I crossed the room to the door and pushed it open. The rain had stopped and through the haze of humidity I could see the morning shuttle arriving on the landing platform. I slipped through the door and jogged the short distance to the base of the platform and took the stairs 2 at a time. As I reached the top and stepped onto the landing pad, I noticed the ground crew already at work unloading supplies from the hold. The pilot was going over the manifest with them when I came running up. He shot me a look, shook his head and smiling, threw me a small, light pouch. "I guess you got my message," I said, snapping a quick, relaxed two-fingered salute his way as I turned away, racing off down the steps. "We re-lifting off shortly. Hurry up, Deckard," he shouted after me. I ripped open the pouch as I disappeared down the stairs. Out slid a new black thermal body glove. I held it to my face and breathed in deeply. It smelled new, nothing like the filthy sewers of a note, the way mine did. I had been on this rock for several years, and there had never been any point to getting a new one, knowing I would just be going back into the sludge and muck below in the caves and sewers. But now, well, now was a different story. I thought, as I walked to the barracks. Now I was getting out of here. No more lizard ants. No more sewers. I threw open the door to the empty barracks and disappeared into the shower, as I stripped off the disgusting old bodysuit. A short time later, I emerged again, clean and adjusting the fit of the new glove. I tossed the old one in the waste chute and slipped on my armor plates. Grabbing my gear bag, rifle, environmental backpack and helmet, I took one last look around, then walked out toward the shuttle. This morning, I chewed on a high-energy ration bar for my breakfast as I walked up the boarding ramp into the ship. The last of the supplies had been offloaded and the pilot was bringing the engines online for our departure. I walked between the twin rows of jump seats. I moved all the way forward, just behind the gunner's seat, and folded my metal seat down. Restraint harnesses hung from the bulkhead in a row behind the seats. I clipped my rifle into the mounted rack in the center of the aisle, and dropped my gear bag and pack to the deck, kicking them back under my seat. I placed my bucket down in front of them and stepped one leg into the harness as I sat down. The thin metal was cold and hard. I thought, as I pulled the restraint up. In the grand scheme of things, it really didn't matter as long as I was leaving this place. I put one arm through a hanging strap, then the other, and clipped the two halves of the harness together with the crotch strap into the center clasp at my chest. I settled in for what was likely to be only the first leg of a long flight. The ramp retracted and rose into the stowed position, airlocks sealing with a hiss. The pilot called back to me. "You in?" I yelled back to be heard over the engines. "Let us get out of here before somebody changes their mind." I felt the ship lift under the force of its repulsor field, and heard the engines whine rising to a loud, dull roar as the shuttle rose further away from the deck and pivoted, climbing skyward. The row of stowed jump seats rattled and the swinging restraint harnesses jangled noisily as the upward-reaching wings lowered into their familiar triangular shape. I leaned forward, peering out the port in front of the gunner's seat, and watched a note slip into the archives of my past tours of duty as we accelerated away into the darkness toward my new post. I closed my eyes and rested my head back against the cold, vibrating bulkhead. Chapter 2. Journey Toward Destiny. Coruscant. The bustling, shining beacon in the center of the known galaxy, once home to the Jedi Temple and the Galactic Senate of the Old Republic, was a planet that had been developed and cultivated over the millennia into one all-encompassing city. It was here, beginning with the slaughter of the unsuspecting Temple Jedi by Darth Vader and our troops of the 501st Legion, and continuing with the rise of Emperor Palpatine, the Old Republic crumbled and fell away under the weight of the crushing new galactic empire. The last remaining decent members of the Senate were removed, and the integrity of its offices breached as they were quickly overrun with bureaucrats, fat from their business associations with the Emperor's new order. Many years had passed since those last days of the Clone Wars, and the first days of turbulence and transition that followed under the Empire. Much that was valued had been lost. The innocent grandeur and the stability of power and reason within the Republic had been splintered into a million ruined shards, scattered to the four corners of the galaxy. The Jedi were mercilessly sought, hunted down and exterminated. It was believed that when the blasters were silenced on the fourth day following the enactment of Order 66, nearly every one of them had been killed. Master and youngling alike, save the Emperor's new Sith apprentice Darth Vader. He once had been a great Jedi warrior and hero of the Republic before his turn to embrace the darker teachings of the Force. Coruscant weathered the storm silently, like tall grass in a strong wind, yielding to the revolution, the transition of power. The city lights winked and shimmered like stars across the planet's surface as a lumbering freighter requested clearance to set down in the Imperial shipyards just outside Imperial City. Asterisk. Sparks erupted from the welding tool and rained down over gloved hands as Taka attached the scope rail to the barrel of his custom rifle. He switched off the welder and pulled his safety goggles up onto the top of his head as he rolled in his chair over to check the crackling request coming through on the comm station. He glanced to an adjacent screen for clearance code transmission. It was the Resolute Servant, inbound heavy freighter from Muscree. He then checked docking availability and keyed the comm to respond. Resolute Servant, you are cleared for approach to landing pad sector 138,011. A ground team will be readied and awaiting your arrival. He keyed off the comm and logged them into the appropriate slot. Then he moved back to his rifle. He screwed the new scope securely in place, it fit down perfectly over the freshly attached mount. The grounding clips pulled loose from the gun with a jerk of his hand as he unclamped the long barrel and wiped away several curled metal shavings. The scope flickered to life as he inserted the power cell clip. He raised the new gun to his shoulder and looked into the eyepiece. The reticle imaging floated over a rusted bolt head protruding from the wall on the far side of the room. He flicked off the lock and fired a single blast of crimson. The bolt head and 2 centimeters of the rusted metal plate on either side was instantly vaporized in a bright flash. A small stream of smoke rose from the blast point as he lifted his eye from the scope to inspect the damage. Now that's more like it, a voice called out from the hallway. Hey, Don T. Shoot. I am just looking for my shuttle assignment. A dirty, armored trooper stuck his head through the door, gearbag over his shoulder and E-11 blaster drawn and held out. Taka lowered his rifle. Sorry, just testing some new sight modifications. Who are you? Where are you headed? There are a couple of us here. I am D. Drag Mosnar. TD-3195, 2 other troopers pushed through the door behind him. Fulson Dans. TD-8733 here and TD-1265 as well. Dans looked at 1265 and asked. WASNT the new guy. 1344, supposed to be heading out with us too. 1265 nodded his head. Yeah, he'll be here, he is tying up some loose ends regarding his transfer. He said he would meet us at the ship. D. Drake looked over his shoulder, then spoke in a hushed tone. You know, I heard something from a friend that works in internal security, at Imperial Center. Danlin Falker. TD-1344, was a captain and commander of a covert recon and assault unit until he got busted down to Stormtrooper and reassigned. Dans asked. What did he do? D. Drake shook his head. I'm not sure. My friend said when he went looking for more details, all that information was marked classified. Whatever it was, he made the wrong person angry. He's shipping out for his new assignment on this flight with us. Taka looked them over a bit as memories of his own reassignment after Bellirin V resurfaced in his thoughts. Okay, let me see your ID holo tags. They all leaned in closer and pulled out their dog tags. As he scanned them, he realized they were all assigned to the same flight he had been scheduled for. He was getting a new post assignment, very hush-hush, no information offered as to destination, but a new destination nonetheless. A new assignment would be a welcome thing. This office was definitely a dead end, looks like we'll be flying together for a while. You guys are on the same ship out as me. Unfortunately it won't be a shuttle. We've been bumped to a small cargo ship. Let me grab my things and we can walk out there together, my shift here is just about over, asterisk. Danlin Falker, with gear and rifle slung over his shoulder, raced out of the front of the administration building adjacent to Imperial Center. He ran through the crowds across the open plaza toward the loaded air taxi as it rose from its boarding stall and slipped into the congested lanes of traffic in the late afternoon sky. It had been that kind of day to be sure, he thought, as he threw off his gear bag and sat down, bucket in hand, on a bench to wait for the next taxi. He closed his eyes and rubbed his temples as the events of the past few days replayed over and over in his head and faint memories of the past crept out. He barely remembered being here so many years ago as a child, before the truth about his uncle had been exposed and his family had paid the price for it. When he was 8, his mother had entrusted him with the information that his uncle was a Jedi Knight. He idolized his uncle, and was eager to become a Jedi himself. Unfortunately, a low midichlorian count had prevented him from joining the Order. It was during the failed Jedi attempt to seize power of the Republic and overthrow His Excellency, Chancellor Palpatine, that his uncle was killed while trying to assassinate a group of senior clone officers. He was stunned by the news and both saddened and angered that his dead uncle was a traitor against the Republic. Between this and the bitterness he felt from being denied his own entry for training, he lost all faith in the Jedi and their ways. The family business was seized, and all privileges stripped from them. His mother swore it was not because of their association with the Jedi, but he knew in his heart that his uncle had betrayed them. Indeed, all of the Jedi had betrayed the very people they were sworn to protect. It had become a very dark time to live in the Republic, and darker still if you were associated in any way with the Jedi. He remembered attending the schools here on Coruscant, before his family had been forced to move to Nar Shaddaa, and a life far away from their ties with the Jedi. Life was hard on Nar Shaddaa, but he somehow managed to secure a decent education and was ultimately accepted into the Imperial Naval Academy on Karita, under an assumed name. He worked hard and displayed a sharp mind and a keen sense of both military and unconventional tactics. Following his uneventful graduation, he had been assigned to the 35th Planetary Assault Squadron. Following a promotion, he became a detachment leader specializing in recon, boarding, and neutralization of orbital defense platforms. It was not until just a standard week ago, when during a background inquiry performed by his CO, that his true name was discovered. He had lied to the Academy Entry Board, his troops and his superiors, and his family had known ties to a traitorous Jedi. Still, his service record was exemplary and his loyalty to the Empire unswerving. Senior Command agreed. Following a past Internal Security Bureau loyalty test, he would be allowed to continue serving, but would be demoted, stripped of his command and reassigned to the ranks of the Stormtrooper Corps. Now, just days later, he sat in the dirty armor he had trained in, waiting for an air taxi to take him to a ship that would connect him to his new assignment. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes as he heard another taxi approaching. He gathered his gear and moved closer to the edge of the boarding platform as the large vehicle slowed and settled alongside the gated stall. There were no others waiting as the gates opened, and he made his way into the crowded lower level. With barely even standing room available there, he decided to go up the stairs to the open, upper deck. There were only a handful of others up there, a few couples enjoying the cool air and the romantic sunset. There were many comfortable seats there, and he found one along the handrail of the outer edge, put down his things and sat. There was the familiar sounding of the two low tones, and the entry gates closed as the taxi glided away from Imperial Center. The air was cooling off a bit, after a hot day, and the sun was setting in a beautiful tapestry of color and light that painted the Coruscant sky. The wind lifted his hair and made him squint as the large vehicle slipped through the travel lanes and headed a bit further out toward the shipyards and the large waterfront estates of the rich beyond them. The cool air and silence was just what he needed to clear his head before he shipped out. Ahead, a tall, narrow docking tower rose up to the travel lane from the shipyards below. He pressed a small button on the handrail, indicating a stop there was needed, grabbed his gear and made his way down the stairs again. The air vehicle slowed and glided to a gentle stop alongside the tower. The two tones sounded and the gates opened. He stepped out to the durasteel platform. The tone sounded again. The gates closed behind him and the air taxi moved away, leaving him in silence, except for the whipping of the wind. The view from this height was both dizzying and amazing. The tall structures of Imperial City had been left behind, and the massive, open expanse of the shipyards now stretched out beneath him, filled with ships arriving, departing, boarding and unloading. He felt the tower sway somewhat as he stepped into the turbolift and selected the button for the ground level of the shipyard below. The lift dropped quickly toward the Duracrete far below, as there were no stops along the spindly tower. He closed his eyes, drawing in a slow breath, held it for a few seconds, then let it out slowly. Another tone sounded as the lift stopped. The doors opened and Falker stepped out onto the wide expanse of the Imperial shipyards, *****.